Hi everyone, my name is Nicolas Cole and welcome to another episode of the Grow Clinic podcast. Today we have one of the biggest digital writers who has over a decade's experience writing on the internet. His name is Nicolas Cole, and we discuss becoming a better writer, what it takes to become a great writer, the benefits of writing on the internet, where to publish your work, how many platforms to use, and what kind of content you should publish on the internet. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the show. So how are you doing, Nicholas?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Before I start, it is an honor to actually speak to you because I've been reading your content for about 5 years. So like speaking to you now is actually very impressive.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I really appreciate you reading because I've been writing online for a long time.
Just tell us about that, about your writing journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a writer. I've always just enjoyed it. I saw the internet as a way of being able to share it with other people. And I just really enjoy looking for new opportunities to get to write because I think every new platform creates some sort of new language. You know, writing on Quora is different than writing on Medium, is different than writing on Twitter, is different than self-publishing a book on Amazon. You know, every platform forces you to think about writing in a different way. And I love that. I love every time I play with something new, I get to reorient my brain and kind of think about it differently. So yeah.
So what was like the first platform you started with?
Well, the very first platform I started with was when I was a teenager. I wrote on this gaming site, and it was kind of like, I guess a good way of thinking about it would be if Medium or Blogger, there was a website called Blogger back in the 2000s. If it was exclusively for gaming, that's what it was like. Like anyone could start a blog and you could read other people's blogs. It was more of a social blogging site. And I was a gamer at the time, and that's how I really started writing on the internet. And that's what introduced me to this idea of, I think, writing outside of the lens of writing books or writing English papers. You know, we grow up thinking of writing in a very singular definition. You know, you write an English paper, you write a short story, or you write a book. You know, those are really the only formats that we're told. And so writing on the internet introduced me to a format called, you can say whatever you want in however many words you want, and then you can put it up on the internet and people can decide whether they like it or not. And I found that so fascinating. And yeah, from the I never stopped. Once I started writing on the internet, that was it. I've been hooked ever since.
Are there times where it feels like you don't have like the vibe to write or anything? Like there's no inspiration you build to write. How do you combat that?
Well, the I think it's important. The reason why I talk a lot about starting writing as a teenager while I was also a gamer is because that's how I was introduced to writing on the internet. I was introduced to it through the lens of a gamer. And so as a result, a lot of what I write about is, I call it the game of writing on the internet. You know, I look at writing online as a game, and games have rules. Games can be mastered. Games require practice, you know. And so if you think about, you know, someone who wants to become a chess champion, for example, a chess champion doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm only going to practice chess when I feel inspired, right? They're just going to practice the game because they want to get better at the game. So I noticed that a lot of writers operate from a place of, I'm only going to write when I feel inspired. And I think that's completely flawed. I think writing is a game, and if you want to get better at the game, then you need to practice the game. And if you feel inspired one day and the writing is easier, well, then that's just gravy on top. That's no different than going to the gym one day and feeling strong, or, you know, going and playing basketball one day and feeling fast or more energized than normal, right? It's just a good day. But that doesn't mean that that's the only day that you can practice.
Speaking of only days, were you always you say you're always a good writer?
Was I always a good writer?
Yeah. Would you say you're always a good writer?
No, not at all. I mean, I graduated college with a degree in fiction writing. I studied writing because I wanted to learn, and I enjoyed spending my time that way. I wasn't good at math, I wasn't good at science, I wasn't really good at anything else. And when I graduated, I had no portfolio. I just had studied creative writing, and I remember going and applying for my first job, and they basically just looked at me like, why would we ever hire you? Like, you have no portfolio, you have no real skills, you just studied creative writing. Like, that doesn't even mean anything. And if I go back and read any of my early Quora answers or my first blogs on the internet as a teenager, I mean, they suck. Of course they suck. But the thing that I really try and emphasize for people that I think is the most interesting part about writing on the internet is that you don't have to be a good writer in order to capture and hold people's attention. Think about if you ever browse on Reddit, someone might have like a really interesting or really funny Reddit post. It could even be a comment to someone else's post. And the post could be grammatically incorrect. It could be all over the place and all borderline illogical. It could be like it would never suffice to be in a book. It would never get a good grade in an English teacher, right? But why do you read it? You read it because for whatever reason, it's interesting to you. And that democratization is so fascinating because you don't have to be a quote unquote good writer in order to get people's attention. And of course you should want to be a good writer. You should strive to understand how to write grammatically correct, or you should strive to learn how to tell a great story and things like that. But the reality is writing is not really about writing. Writing is about thinking. And if the thought you are communicating is new and unique and different or funny or supremely entertaining, then it doesn't really matter if it's correct or not. You're still achieving the thing that you wanted to achieve, which is I got your attention.
So when did you feel like you're a good writer? Although you said writing is about getting people's attention, but when did you feel like you had mastered the game of getting people's attention?
I mean, different phases. Even as a 17-year-old, I thought I had mastered that game on that platform. When I was a teenager, I was one of the most read gaming bloggers. Now, I couldn't write anything else. I couldn't. If someone would have paid me to write, a marketing email, or someone would have paid me to write a landing page or website copy or a really smart article, like I couldn't write anything else, but I knew how to write gaming blogs that got people's attention, stirred drama, and forced people to comment in that community. I was very good at that specific thing, right? So writing online it's an interesting thing because you don't have to be like, you could be. I know a lot of people who are great writers on Twitter. They have hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. They're great writers on Twitter, but they can't write anything else. If you ask them to go write an article on Medium, they don't know what to do, or you have people that write amazing articles on Medium and Quora, but you tell them, hey, go write a book. Can't do it, And so it's to say like, when are you a good writer is a nuanced question, because it really is, well, what kind of writer and in what context, what platform, what specific part of the game are you good at?
That makes sense. So I'm curious about your early years when you were 17, and what did it take to become the highest read, right? What did you have to do every day?
Every day. Yeah, my routine was I would go to school all day. I hated school. I would come home. I hated it. uh, it was hard for me. I really struggled as a student to sit and just listen to a teacher for hours and hours and hours. And I would come home and then I would play World of Warcraft, which was the game that I was playing at the time. And then I would do my homework, have dinner, kind of normal kid stuff. And then I would stay up late. I would pretend to go to sleep. So my parents thought I would go to sleep. And then I would sneak back to my computer. I would play competitive World of Warcraft until about midnight or 1 in the morning. And then from 1 to 2 a.m. every night, my entire senior year of high school, I would write a gaming blog. And I did that every day from 1 to 2 a.m. every single day. And after an entire year, I was one of the most read gaming bloggers on the internet. It's just repetition.
Like it takes a crazy amount of obsession to actually win in creative industry because everyone is trying to say something on the internet. Everyone is trying to write. Everybody's trying to get your attention. But it's like the most consistent person, the most obsessed person that wins in the end.
Yeah, and I can't stress this enough. I mean, I find the vast majority of writers that I interact with think of their craft as this magical experience that happens outside of them. Like they're just the right day and the right time and the right light pouring through the window, and if you just sit down, then the magic comes through you and the writing gods give you something amazing, and that's how most people think about writing. I don't think about writing that way. I think about writing the same way an athlete thinks about training. I ask myself whether or not I'm putting in the hours that are required. I ask myself if I'm practicing enough. I ask myself if I'm reading other people who are going to challenge me and make me better. I think about it like a sport.
That makes sense. Like I think this is like the first time I'm seeing it in this light because everyone is always about telling you to write every day, just blindly write every day. But you're seeing it as a sport, learning from people better than you and doing it every day, even when you don't feel like. So my question is, how do you find inspiration? Because there's a difference between the person who waits for content to come to them and goes out to actually write every day. I feel like you can't write you can't get ideas every day. So how do you turn yourself into an idea machine and just keep getting ideas?
Well, there's two different parts to that. One is I really do believe that ideas are something that can be systematically engineered, and once you understand what makes an idea, where is the opportunity to create something or to write something. Once you know how to do that, you see it everywhere. Like my biggest problem is realizing that the number of things that I want to write in my lifetime, I won't have enough years to write. I have too many ideas. That's my problem now. And so for me, I spend more time thinking about not just what's the idea, but what's the idea that I am best equipped to pursue. Anyone can come up with ideas, right? But in order to figure out which one you should focus on, it's more about, well, what are your skill sets? What are your unique perspectives? Where can you deliver the most value? If you wrote this versus someone else wrote it, are you really the best person to write that, or is someone else the best person to write that? And whenever I come to the conclusion, I'm not the best person to write that, I ignore it. I'm like, someone else can do that, But I think the key to idea generation is not, this is going to sound kind of counterintuitive, but it's not reading. I think reading helps, but where people they over rotate their thinking on, I need to read, and if I read enough, I become a good writer. And that's not how it works. Reading is a good supplement. Reading can make you aware of more things, but writing is what makes you a good writer. And so the more you write, the more you understand what it is you're trying to articulate, the more you understand what you're trying to explain or articulate, the more new ideas you have, because you realize, oh, this thing I'm trying to explain actually has multiple subpoints beneath it. I need to pick those apart. And then in those subpoints, there's even more subpoints. So I need to pick those apart. So once you start going, the ideas never stop flowing. Like even I write a lot about digital writing. How should you write in the digital age? Well, every time I write something, I realize a bunch of readers have 10 questions about the thing that I just wrote, right? So that's 10 new things to write about. And then when I write about those things, readers are going to have another 10 questions. Well, that's 10 more things to write about, right? So it's kind of just, it's like a string. You just, as long as you keep pulling on the string, you realize there's more and more and more to explore.
That is actually very deep, because personally, I've been writing for about 3 years, and I've noticed this exact thing you said, how so like something I wrote about 2 years ago, I think about it and I'm like, oh wow, there's a way I can add more flesh to this that will come out fresh. And I feel like that's how most online contents are today, because the more experienced guys we to the outsider, it may seem like they're writing the same things, but they're only adding more flesh, adding more experience, and that experience only comes with writing consistently.
Yep.
So, how do you tell us about some of your wins when you were in your early 20s? Like you've spoken about when you were 17. Tell us about 18, 19, like subsequently to up until now.
Well, after I got into, I really wanted to be a professional gamer as a kid. That was my dream. It didn't go that way. I was too early to the whole, now you see gamers making YouTube videos and streaming and all of that. I was too early for that. I missed it. And after that, I got into bodybuilding. So I got really into lifting weights from about 19 or 20 to about 26. And I was just a same thing, obsessive. I just was in the gym every day for 3 or 4 hours and completely changed. I went from being a very scrawny, sort of underweight, insecure teenager to all of a sudden putting on, 70 pounds of muscle and looking nothing like my former self. It was a weird and interesting time. But same thing, bodybuilding was the same journey as gaming in many ways. It was, I have goals. I'm obsessive about reaching them. I'm competitive. I treated gaming like a sport. I treated bodybuilding like a sport. I lived it. I breathed it. I did it every day, and the thing is, even through gaming and even through bodybuilding, I was writing. That's always kind of been the theme in my life. Any other passion or interest I have, I'm always still writing. And when I was 26, I was in, the best shape of my life. I felt amazing. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to make fitness my career. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I had put on all this muscle and people were starting to pay me because they wanted to learn from me. I would train with pro bodybuilders, and my whole life was like kind of heading down this path of fitness. And when I was 26, it was actually on my birthday, my 26th birthday. I went to the gym and I herniated a disc in my neck. And it was at the end of my workout. And all of a sudden I think I was like doing push-ups or something, doing a superset. And I felt this pop in my neck. And I was so like, to give you a sense of just how in it I was, I felt this pop in my neck. And this was at the end of like a 2-hour workout. And I was so just in that zone. Like when I was in the gym, I was like a different human, that I proceeded to keep lifting for another like 30 minutes, not like just being like, oh, my neck feels weird. And it wasn't until I got home and, I started to get out of that zone that I realized I am in just excruciating pain. I had like frozen broccoli on my neck, and just, it was horrible. And then I, went to the hospital the next day and realized that I had herniated this disc, and I was on painkillers for 4 months and couldn't go back to the gym for like a year. I was in physical therapy for like 2 years, and I've never been the same since. Like so that completely changed my whole life. But that moment also is what forced me to finish my first book. It forced me to take writing more seriously, which led to me quitting my job, which led me to ghostwriting, which led me to building a ghostwriting company, which led me to, and all of a sudden my whole life just reoriented. So in a weird way, I'm kind of thankful for it. I'm thankful that this injury happened, because if I didn't get injured, I don't think I ever would have stopped lifting as intensely as I was.
So tell us about quitting your job. What inspired that? What platforms were you writing on? What were you doing?
At the time, I had been working as a copywriter. So I worked at an advertising agency in Chicago, and it wasn't, I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people that I worked with, but it wasn't anything that I felt super inspired by. To be honest, a lot of my job was I worked very closely with the creative director. He was a mentor of mine, and I would ghostwrite for him. So I would ghostwrite his emails. I would ghostwrite proposals to clients. I would proofread 100-page proposals for huge projects. And so even though that work was really, like, honestly pretty boring at the time, like ghostwriting follow-up emails and stuff is not like riveting stuff, but it taught me a ton. And it taught me a lot about looking very closely at language and proofreading, taught me a lot about editing, and that was really my introduction to the world of ghostwriting. I didn't know it at the time, but that was my introduction to it. And so a lot of the things that I was writing about on the internet were similar to the things I was learning at work. I was writing about business. I was writing about marketing. I was writing about entrepreneurship. My mentor and boss was a serial entrepreneur. He would tell me stories all the time. He would kind of bestow all this knowledge onto me, and I would just go write about it on the internet. And I got really good at it. I had a ton of these answers go viral on Quora. I had Inc. magazine republish dozens and dozens of my answers. Eventually they gave me my own column. And I was like a 25-year-old who had never started a company before, writing about entrepreneurship and business. And, people loved it. And it was just because I read a lot and I was surrounded by really smart people. And so I was just sharing the things that I was learning from them. And that ultimately then led to other people asking me, hey, I love reading your business content. Can I pay you to help me write my business content? And then, next thing you know, I'm ghostwriting for all these CEOs and things like that.
So I feel like the secret to succeeding as a writer today is to publish online, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have nothing really to lose. Like, so many people think about the downside of writing on the internet. What if someone sees something that I wrote and they don't agree with it? Or what if someone comments something that's mean, or like they just think about the downside. But the reality is the upside is so exponentially powerful compared to the downside that and like the reality is most people aren't writing anything that even has a downside. Like you writing about your opinions on marketing, like, is not there's nothing catastrophic that can come from that. It's just very basic stuff. So I just really encourage people to think about, the way I like putting it is like this: the way that we all operate in the world is we try and scale ourselves in a very manual way. So what I mean by that is, if you and I go meet up for coffee, well, the first thing that we do is we try and get to know each other. I tell you a couple things about me, you tell me a couple things about you. And then over time, as we share those stories and thoughts and insights with each other, we quote unquote get to know each other, right? And the more that we do that with people, that is how we scale ourselves in the real world. The more people we have conversations with, the more people that we share personal anecdotes with, the more people we share our life stories with, the more people we quote unquote know. Well, that's really inefficient if you think about it, right? Like, how many coffee meetings can you take before you go, I've literally told the same 5 life stories over and over again. I don't want no more coffee meetings, right? I'm bored of it. I'm done. But the reality is, you can do the same exact thing on the internet, and you can tell those stories, and you can share your perspectives and say the exact same things that you would say manually over a coffee conversation. But you can put it in text on the internet, where not just one person across the table is reading it or listening to you say it, but thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people can hear you say it. So that I think is the most powerful, different way of thinking about, how do I increase the likelihood of opening up doors of opportunity? Well, everyone always says life is about who you know. Okay, well, you can only know so many people manually in your life, right? But you can know millions of people digitally online. And that's all you have to do. You just have to take the same things that you would say in a coffee conversation, write them down, and go put them on the internet. And now, instead of talking to one person, you can talk to thousands.
Do you advise a new writer to start publishing on one platform alone, or to publish on 3 different platforms at once?
Yeah, I think that when you're first starting out, everything is about simplicity. It is all about doing less. And so what that means is, you don't have to write everywhere. You don't need to write on Medium and on Twitter and on Quora and have an Amazon book page and have a Goodreads page. And, it's actually really inefficient. Instead, what you want is, you want one platform, and you want to spend as much time as you possibly can mastering that one platform. Because what's going to happen is, when you dedicate all of your time and headspace and energy to one platform, you're going to learn the language of that platform 10 times faster. And once you learn the language of that platform, you're going to grow 10 times faster. And then when you grow on that platform, you are going to build your audience on that platform. And once you get to a place of maturity on one platform, it is so much easier to then go, okay, now I want to go to a second one. But, I'm a great example. I've got, 60,000 something followers, tens of millions of views on Quora. I've got 90,000 followers, tens of millions of views on Medium. I've got 60 something thousand followers on Twitter, tens of thousands of, or tens of millions of views. So I have multiple platforms with audiences, but even right now, I'm only focusing on one. I don't really write on Quora. I don't really write on Medium. I'm just focused on Twitter, because I just want to grow Twitter right now. And I only really need one platform in order to drive attention to the other things that I want to do. You can use multiple, but you really don't need it. Like, people forget that each one of these platforms has hundreds of millions of users. You're not even scratching the surface of 1% of 1% of the one platform you're on. So your problem isn't, I've run this platform dry, right? You don't need more platforms. You just need to get good at one of them, so that you can keep tapping into more and more and more of the users that are there. That's it.
How long do it take you to master Quora, for example, or Twitter?
At this point, I mean, once you understand how the games work, they're all pretty similar. I would say that, like, it probably on average takes about a year for anyone to really learn how a platform works. Even me on Twitter, I started writing more seriously on Twitter about a year and a half ago. And the first 6 months, I mean, like, you would have thought I was a nobody. You would have thought I was just another person starting to write on the internet, like none of my tweets or Twitter threads were getting any traction, and I went through the same learning curve that everyone else does. I was like, oh, this is stupid. Twitter's broken. It doesn't work. You blame everybody else. I go through the same process, but it took me about 6 months to a year to figure out what are the rules of the platform? How does it work? And I had to create a lot of things to learn that. I didn't just try that for one day. I tried that for a year. And now a year and a half later, now I'm growing a ton. Now I'm growing by like 10,000 followers a month. So cool, right? But it takes that process to get there. You gotta really sink your teeth into this is a different world. Writing on Twitter is not the same as writing on Medium, is not the same as writing on Quora, it's not the same as writing elsewhere.
So let's get back to your agency. Were there any struggles in the beginning? How did you overcome them?
Yeah, there were hundreds of them. I mean, everything is challenging in the beginning. It's challenging because you don't know what you don't know. So it's hard to improve at things that you don't know are even a problem, right? Or you don't even know there's a solution. You're blind to it. So, I mean, I think that's a big reason why I enjoy writing about writing, which is kind of meta. I enjoy writing about the process of writing and especially how to write on the internet for other people, because it was such a difficult thing for me to learn. Like, I didn't understand, well, how am I supposed to get people's attention with the things that I write, or how do I stay true to myself and write things that I feel are important or creative while also tapping into the things that other people want to read and tapping into their wants and needs and interests. There's all these questions you have as a writer in the beginning. And so for me, I think it's important to remember too, like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, a lot of these resources didn't exist. Like now I'm building Ship 30 for 30 with my co-founder, Dickie. And that's in 30 days, you basically get what took me 10 years to learn. So think about that. Like that's a pretty incredible resource considering there was no one that really had that information. I just had to go try things. So yeah, I mean, there were tons of struggles. I didn't know how to write. I didn't know where to write. I didn't know what was considered good writing. I didn't understand why some people had huge audiences and other people had small audiences. Like none of it really made sense to me. I just started and then I just kept going.
So I'll take that as a tip for building an audience on the internet. So aside your consistency, what other things? Because consistency is a common advice for building an audience. What do you think is another advice for building an audience on the internet?
Well, I mean, yeah, consistency is it's funny because people talk about consistency as if, oh, I was consistent for 4 days. Oh, I was consistent for a month. I don't think of consistency that way. I think of consistency in years. The first thing that I did when I started writing on Quora is I said, I'm going to write every single day on Quora for a year. And the reason I said that was because I knew that in order for me to really get data, for me to really learn whether or not Quora was a good platform for me, is that I couldn't work with 7 days worth of data. I couldn't work with like a month of data. I wanted an entire year. And if I put in a year, then I would be able to really objectively see, am I improving? Am I not? Is this a good platform or not? So first of all, I encourage people to think about consistency, not in days or weeks or even months. Think about consistency in terms of years. But in terms of other things, like I think the hardest lesson for me to learn as a writer was it's not about you. Like so many writers walk into the game thinking, this is what I want to write about. This is what I want to do. It's all I statements. I. This is what I think. This is what I want to say. This is why I matter, you know? And what took me a while to learn is that, yes, while you can have your own wants and needs and desires as the writer, the thing that really matters are the wants and needs and desires and questions and interests of the reader. And so it's not about, I see the same thing. It's almost a cliche. You see someone who goes, I want to be a writer, and they start, a Medium or a Quora or an Instagram or a Twitter, and they start posting things, and you start reading it, and you're like, cool, but I feel like you wrote this for yourself, right? It almost reads like a public journal entry or a public diary, or someone goes, I'm going to start a blog. I'm going to start blogging about my life. And you read it, and as the reader, you don't really get anything out of it. You're just like, okay, you wrote this for yourself, which is fine, but just understand that you wrote this for you, right? You didn't write this for me, the reader. You wrote this for you. And the switch that has to happen is, as the writer, you have to start putting the wants and needs and interests of the reader ahead of your own. You have to start writing for them. What are their questions? What do they want help with? What do they find interesting? And of course, you then want to find the balance of, you're writing about things you're passionate about, right? But it's in service of the reader. And that change in mindset is very, very hard for people when they're first starting out.
How long do you think it takes for that mindset to shift?
It completely depends on the individual, because there are some people where I say that to them and they change their mindset instantly. It's like they just needed someone to point it out. They just instantly are different, right? And there are other people who are very emotionally attached to the idea of them being a writer, right? And so they're really rooted in, it's all about me. I'm who's important. And you can say it to them every day for 10 years. They're not changing, right? Like they're off in dreamland, and they kind of think of themselves as this otherworldly writer figure. You can't help them. They got to learn that on their own.
Do you think everyone should write?
I would like to believe that I think everyone should write. I would like to believe that. But truthfully, I don't think, and to be clear, I also think that everyone can write. That's the thing. Most people think there are writers and there aren't writers, or you're born with the gift of writing, or you're not. No, everyone can write. It's a teachable thing. But I don't think that everyone gets out of it what I get out of it, or what certain people get out of it. For me, writing is both a profession. It's how I make a living, but it's also an exercise in self-reflection. It's how I get to know myself. I get a lot out of writing. I don't know that everyone gets as much out of writing as I do. So if you don't get as much out of it, I don't think you have to do it, but if you are one of those people who you feel like you get a lot out of it, then I would encourage you to get more out of it.
How long have you been writing again? How many years?
I think I've been writing, let's see, 17. I'm 31 now. So I've been writing on the internet for 14 years, which is wild, but that's a long time. But I've been writing since I was a kid. I mean, I journaled as a kid. I was in my 4th grade poetry club back when I was just a youngster. I mean, I've been writing my entire life. I can't remember a time of my life when I wasn't fascinated by words and reading and writing.
So since you started writing on the internet, which is 14 years ago, what we say has been your biggest failure? Because you're talking about your wins.
Well, I'm the type of person where I don't look at too many things in my life as failures. You know, I tend to look at things as uh, opportunities to learn or lessons. But I will say that I really wish I had had some of these resources or I'd had some of this knowledge earlier on. Like I went through my entire high school experience without even knowing that you could be a writer. I didn't even know. I mean, I got my first year of college. I studied journalism because that was the only thing that I thought you could do with writing. Like I just was like, oh, you got to go work for a newspaper. Like I had no idea that there were all these other paths. And when I look back, self-publishing started, I mean, basically right around 2009, 10, 11, 12, those years when I was in college, self-publishing was really starting. And I look back and I really wish that I had known. I just didn't know. And it kind of is a shame to me because I think if I had gotten introduced to self-publishing as a 19-year-old, I think I would have started writing books then. And I would love to go back and read those things that I would have written, and I didn't. And to me, that's just a shame. It's a shame that I didn't know that those things were an option. So I think that's also kind of what drives me too, is I really enjoy sharing the things that I've learned. I really enjoy giving back to other people. I really enjoy teaching and talking to people who are younger than me, like especially high school students, even middle schoolers or college students, and going, hey, you can get started doing this a whole lot earlier. Like if I was, it blows me away. I see teenagers now on Twitter who are doing incredible things. Like they're teenagers with massive audiences just because they're getting good at curating other people's work. If I was a 17-year-old today with access to Twitter as it is now and Amazon self-publishing platform, I probably would not go to college, to be honest, and I would just write constantly. It's not, I don't look at it as a failure. I just kind of look back and go, man, it would be really, really cool to get to start over again, but with all the tools and resources that now exist.
Before we go, would you like to tell us about Ship 30 for 30?
Yeah, I mean, Ship 30 for 30 is a cohort-based writing program that helps people get started writing online. And it's framed as a 30-day challenge to get people to take action and publish what we call atomic essays. So these short 250-word atomic essays every day for 30 days, all with the goal of learning how to build a daily writing habit. That's really the goal. But the program is essentially everything that we've been talking about. These are all the things that I wish I would have learned 10 years ago. It's how do you write headlines? How do you format your writing on the internet? How do you get people's attention? How do you structure your ideas? How do you come up with new ideas? How do you come up with so many ideas that you have something new to write about every day for 30 days? What are viral templates that you can use so that you can write things that have the potential to reach millions of people? There's all these frameworks for writing in the digital age. And a lot of them I have just taught myself. I've just created them for myself because there was nobody that was really doing this. There was no one who was teaching me this, right? So I had to create it for myself. So Ship 30 is very much a mechanism for us to take those learnings and pass them along to other writers who want to start writing on the internet.
So I'll make sure to leave the link. So Nicolas, it's been an awesome conversation. I really learned a lot. So where can people find you on the internet?
Twitter these days is where I'm hanging out. Nicolas Cole 77. I'm really enjoying Twitter. It's very different. I've written thousands and thousands of Quora answers and Medium articles, and I like Twitter is a very different format for writing, and I'm having a lot of fun with it these days. So yeah, hit me up there. I try and respond to everything.
Thank you for coming on the show. Have a nice day.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming this far. My name is Nicolas Cole. Find me on Twitter at Growth Clinic. Growth Clinic with 2 C's at the end. Or check my website at tochkokoro.com.